Hi, my name is Jefe, and I'm here to talk a little bit about search engine optimization and how to be driving traffic to your WordPress website. I'll be completely frank with you, a lot of this content is not all that WordPress specific. It's kind of generic. Most of the sites that I've worked on have been WordPress sites. I will take a few minutes and talk about a couple of WordPress plugins, but that is not really the core of my presentation. I am absolutely on Twitter, but I do very little content relevant professional type Twitter posting. It's mostly like me hanging out with my friends and goofing around. However, if you're interested in what people are talking about in the SEO world, that particular Twitter list is excellent. There are a lot of people on that list, and it's very, very active. And they're, basically, if you just have 10 minutes and you want to kind of scan through to see what's happening and what's new, you're very, very likely to find some new, useful, and relevant information there. This slide will come back at the very end of the presentation, so if you don't get this now, don't worry, you'll get it later. So some of the content, some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today, definitely going to spend some time talking about keywords, how we identify them, different ways of thinking about them. We're going to talk a little bit about structured data, broken link, content clusters, some of these other concepts that you may have encountered before, you may have some familiarity with, but you might not really understand how they interact and how they relate to SEO. So I'm going to kind of go through three different sections. The first section, I want to talk about these sort of concepts that are really important, relevant to driving search traffic, making sure that your site and your pages are indexed, that your content gets seen by Google, so that Google can then share that with people that run queries, and they can match the queries to the content that you have on your site. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about each of those four concept ideas. I am going to talk about three different plugins. I'm not going to talk about Yoast because anybody's ever done any SEO on WordPress, and many people who haven't done SEO on WordPress have already played with Yoast. So, to be honest, most of my WordPress sites have Yoast simply because I haven't changed it or updated it. I actually really like all-in-one, which we were just talking about, and Rank Math, which is also excellent. Both have a lot more features than Yoast does, and certainly, definitely more than the free version of Yoast. And then the current price for the paid version, I think, is like $90 or something like that. Broken link checker, also a good, useful tool that is not a feature in Yoast. And then Google XML Sitemaps is a separate sitemap plugin. Yoast also does sitemaps. Many of the others do sitemaps, but I kind of like the way this one does it better. And then the last thing I want to wind up, if I've got a little bit of time left and manage to hold your attention, kind of two concepts that have really been coming to the fore over the past half decade or so, somewhere it says 5 years. And as we're in 2020, I think these are becoming a more critical part of better websites and the ones that are more likely to continue to show up higher in search results. And then I'm going to stick around for a few questions afterwards. Unfortunately, I have a client meeting in Chicago tomorrow and I have a 6:30 flight out of LaGuardia, so I'm not going to stick around much afterwards. I'm going to skate so I can go to bed. Okay, so these are three different things that interact with one another, and I really think of it's tricky to think of a yin and yang as a three-part, but I really think about the robots.txt and the sitemap are sort of a yin and yang of communicating to the search engines what you want them to see and what you want them to index. And indexing is the key word there, because basically when you do a search on Google, the results that Google returns are things that are coming from inside the Google index. So the robots.txt file, and I will show you an example of one, is basically a list telling Google don't look at these pages. Don't pay attention. And often those are pages like shopping carts or membership things. If you've got a commerce page, sometimes they're your like CSS files. There's a whole bunch of stuff that for one reason or another you might not want to be indexed. You might not want those things to show up in search results. The sitemap is how we tell Google what we do want to show up in search results. And if you have a site, particularly one where you're putting up regular content, like a blog or a photo site or something like that, and you are regularly producing content, Google has a variety of ways of finding content. One of the predominant ways is through links. But if you're producing a lot of content and you're not getting links coming in all of the time, your sitemap is the most reliable way to consistently let Google know, this is my content, this is what I want to be seen, this is what I want to be showing people. For those people who are looking at sitemaps and trying to evaluate them, one of the tricks that I've learned is that if you go to a sitemap file, you can save it on your desktop and view it. But one of the other things that you can do is you can actually open up Microsoft Excel, and you can go to the open a file and then browse for a file, and you can put the URL, the address for the sitemap into Excel, and it will open up the sitemap in Excel. It makes it really easy to look at, really easy to use. The third thing is the no index, and this is not a separate file. This is an instruction that goes on in the HTML on the page itself. And the no index tells Google, do not put this page in the index. We don't want to deliver this to people. This is something that for whatever reason is private, it's secret, it's not shared. Oftentimes when you are developing a new site and you have your live site or your legacy site and then your new site on a staging site, you would use the no index on your pages on your staging site because you don't want the new site to be in the index until you launch it, until it's ready. And there's lots of other reasons that you might want to use the no index. And one of the challenges that I find often, the robots.txt tells Google, do not look at this page. That's the explicit instruction, don't look at this page. The implicit instruction is, if you're not going to look at it, don't index it, don't post it. But that instruction is not explicit, it's implicit. And Google will disregard that if they have other signals saying that this is a page that people are looking at. So for example, if you've got a page that has inbound links from a dozen different domains to that page, and you have in your robots.txt file, don't look here, Google is getting very, very mixed signals. How do you think Google resolves those signals?
Ranks you lower?
Nope.
No, it indexes it.
It indexes it and?
And what?
You get one of these. No information is available for this page because you have told Google not to look at the page. So they never saw the no index. So they disregard this. But it still shows up in the index like that. So you want to make sure that you're sending the right signals. All right. This is an example of a robots.txt file. This is Google's robots.txt file. One of the things you want to make sure you always have in your robots.txt file is a link to your sitemap. And most of the SEO tools that you're going to find will create that for you by default. However, if you're working with a sitemap tool that doesn't naturally put your sitemap correctly at /sitemap.xml, it might not be there. So it's something worth checking and making sure that you take a look at. And you'll notice that this is sitemap.xml. not sitemap.html. An HTML sitemap it's a page that a viewer can look at, and it looks like a site, looks like a regular ordinary page, and it's got all of your links and all of your pages on it. 15 to 20 years ago, lots of people said that was important. Google looked at that. Now nobody looks at that. You still run into developers that think it's important, they like it, they want to put it up. It's worthless, doesn't mean anything. You really want your XML sitemap.
Do I understand you correctly that the XML file can be opened up in Excel?
100% right. So for example, if you happen to have your laptop with you and you opened up Microsoft Excel right now, I could do it if you wanted to see it, and you browse through Excel, say File, Open, and you browse, you can just type this in and it will open it up in Excel, and it makes it terrifically easy to read and to copy and paste, because all of the URLs are in one column, all the other information is in the next column, all the other information in the next column. It is a really great hack to be able to use Excel to open up and review a sitemap.
I'm missing where this robots.txt file comes from. Where does it, how does it get formed?
Most of the SEO plugins will create it.
So it's not something we
Generally not, unless you might have a situation where there are specific, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because there's a bunch of slides. This is an opportunity for you to do a little bit of like Googling, and like there is a group of folks that get together and discuss like how to use a robots.txt file, the history of robots.txt files. There are actually some really fun and interesting robots.txt files out there. I think it was Nike, but I don't remember who it was, basically did Isaac Asimov's iRobot as a robot.txt file. I've also seen a software company that buried within their robot.txt file were their job listings, and their feelings were, if you're looking here, you're smart enough, we want to talk to you.
Which sites were those?
It's been a couple of years, I don't remember, but you know, it's interesting. You know, the other thing that you can also do is you do a Google search for creative or interesting robots.txt files, and they'll come up. And they're, you know, developers, they're wacky people. What can I say? You wouldn't know.
Well,
Half developers, right?
right.
So then this is a sitemap, and this is what the sitemap looks like when you look at it as a web page. When you look at it as an Excel file, it just looks like an Excel file, and then all of these URLs line up in one column, and then all these other things will line up in other columns. It makes it really easy if you're using a site crawler to copy and paste all of the URLs out of like a single column and post them somewhere else and crawl those. Super handy. I was surprised, maybe not that surprised, that a bunch of really large sites that create a lot of content, Amazon doesn't have an easy to find sitemap. It might be there somewhere, I couldn't find it. But yeah, the New York Times does, because they're always putting up fresh content. They want to make sure that gets seen. All right. Next topic, changing from those, and we can kind of come back if we have questions. A lot of people in SEO talk about something called the long tail keywords. Who's heard that phrase? All right. A couple people haven't heard that phrase before? All right. So basically the idea is that the long tail keywords, people often describe those as keywords that have more words in the search phrase, like a longer word or a longer query. They will call that long tail. That's not actually accurate. Basically, when you look at a curve, this represents a small number of search terms where each of them gets a tremendous amount of search volume. So we call those the head terms. They can account for, this right here can be 20 to 30% of your traffic, even though it might only be 30 or 40 words. Massive search volume. The challenge there is, because those are big search volume terms, lots of other people are competing for those terms. And then out at this end, what we call the long tail these are scores, hundreds, maybe, possibly depending on your site, maybe thousands of queries. And each of those queries might only count for 3, 5, or 10 searches a month. But cumulatively, because there are so many of them, they can count for a tremendous amount of your site traffic. And because a lot of them are very particular, many of them are longer queries with more words in them, you have a better opportunity to be able to rank for them if you create content that answers those questions, responds to those things, because there's not going to be as much competition for them.
Question on that. So
Yes.
I mean, those keywords going to be less expensive.
Well, so we're talking about organic search right now, so we don't pay for these. But if you are talking about paid search, yes, very likely they would be less expensive, so they're going to be less competitive.
And then from a content perspective, is that how people sometimes, like if it's a blog or something that's very like, content generated, is that kind of how they'll come up with what they're gonna produce their content around?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a keyword first, then content kind of thing, rather than saying I'm gonna make content on this and then now let's go over the keyword strategy.
Correct. Yes, you would think about your keyword strategy. So let's break this down. So before I did all of this stuff, I was in the hospitality industry. I owned a restaurant. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about web development and SEO in the service of food. We're going to talk a little bit about schema, structured data, and one of the first areas where schema was really dominant was in recipes, because you would see pictures and you would see how long it took to produce the recipe and all this other stuff. So a head term might be how to cook. A middle term might be how to cook corn. Your longer tail might be how to cook corn in Southern style. Your really long tail terms that are going to get many, many fewer queries, but you have a much higher chance of ranking well if you create content that matches those queries. How to cook corn in a kettle fryer in the summertime or something like that. Yeah?
That phrase goes going to have to be in quotes if someone's searching, I guess.
Not necessarily.
So I find when I search it pulls up terms, just individual words that were in the string.
Well, that's true. Often that's true because there isn't an existing page that answers your query directly.
Right, so if there's one in quotes that's going to get it.
Right.
And at the top.
Theoretically. I mean, there are other factors at play, but that's a strong one. So yes. 92% of the queries that Google serves results on in a month, 92% of them get 10 searches or less per month. That's the vast majority of queries in Google are getting 10 searches or less per month. So if you really want to rank, if you want to get traffic, you got to be thinking about those. All right. I run SEO for an agency up by Bryant Park, not too far from here. So we have big clients, and big clients are always focused on their key performance indicators. And oftentimes those are revenue, conversions, how many people sign on to get the newsletter or whatever. Our other performance indicators that we use to track the impact of the efforts that we're making, bringing them towards those conversions and towards those sales, really fall into 3 categories. One is, how are the keywords ranking? Everybody can say, oh, we're going to get you on page 1, but we're going to get you on page 1 for what? So one of the things we look at is terms that are important to the client. We'll also look at how many terms are on page 1, or how many terms moved onto page 1 last week or last month. So we're going to use rank tracking tools and there are many of them. Bright Edge is a big one. They've got an office here in New York. They're mostly a nice bunch of people. I did work there for a little while, but it's been over a year since I was there. Conductor is Bright Edge's biggest competitor. Moz used to be called SEO Moz, based out of Seattle. Also a nice bunch of people. Also, they do rank tracking. There's a whole bunch of these. One of the really important things to consider is you can't do this yourself, because every query is local and personalized. So if you are working for someone and you're doing development for someone and they want to know, if you do a search for, I'm going to use one of my clients as an example, water parks in Texas, the results that you get when you do that search in Austin are going to be different from the results you get if you do that search in Beaumont or if you do that search in New York City. So a good rank tracking tool is going to really help you keep track of how those terms are ranking outside of your own personal search history. You've probably noticed that when you find some sites that you like and you visit them a lot, those are the sites that come up often in your search results. So that doesn't really qualify as a valid rank tracking tool to check how it comes up for you. That's number one. Number two, Google Analytics. Hopefully everybody has some experience with this. Google Analytics is what's going to let you know what people are doing when they're on your website. Are they visiting and bouncing? Are they looking at a dozen pages? Are they spending a lot of time? Are they converting? Which pages are they looking at? Which pages are they looking at more? Which pages are they running away from? Are they abandoning shopping carts? All this stuff that happens on your website, that's Google Analytics. Search Console, which people still call Webmaster Tools, even professionals that are in the industry still call it Webmaster Tools. How long has it been? 8 years? Longer. It's called Search Console now. But I think even the URL still says Webmaster Tools or something, or says Google Webmasters or something like that. This really looks at how your site appears in search. It lets you know what keywords you're ranking for and what keywords are driving traffic to your site. It lets you know oftentimes if you have errors that aren't being indexed. There's a tremendous amount of information about your presence in Google search results. How many pages are being indexed, who is linking into you, all of those things that influence how you rank really come out of Google Search Console. Very, very useful. These three things together can help you build a dashboard of really critical, important things. And the note above from Peter Drucker, you can't manage what you can't measure. And if you are putting effort into doing these things, the way to determine whether that effort is paying off, you got to measure it. And then this is simply a screenshot of 3 different domains and how many URLs are ranking on page 1, 2, and 3 for those domains. It's just a sample. I'm going to be honest, it's been a couple of years since I have presented. Am I doing okay in terms of the pace? Are we is this working for you guys? Okay. All right. The last from my kind of opening set of pieces is that links still matter. Links are a very, very tricky thing. Google will penalize you if they believe that you are buying links. If a lot of your links are coming from third world link farms, you decide I need to get 10,000 links, and somebody says I can fix you up with 10,000 links. Instead of going up in rankings, you're going to go down in rankings because they're not credible, they're not useful. So one of the things that we want to make sure that you're doing when you're creating your site, use descriptive anchor text. If you have a button or a link and it says click here, that does nothing to add value. It does nothing to communicate to Google what you're clicking on. It really doesn't do very much for your user to let them know what is being clicked on. Really be descriptive. Say, this is my submission form, or this is my whatever, find more pictures, or download the pictures of your wedding, or something like that. Make sure that your anchor text is descriptive. It's helpful for the user, but it also helps Google know what that destination page is about. So when they're deciding what to produce or deliver index pages, what queries to associate with those, that anchor text really communicates a lot about that. So terrifically valuable, and it's a unfortunately terribly lost opportunity for all the people who just say button or click here or don't communicate. It's easy, no reason why you shouldn't be doing it. If you are working on getting inbound links, and I do recommend that you do that, relevance matters. If you are a auto repair shop and you get links from car dealerships, or you get links from like the local car club, those are going to matter a whole lot more than getting links from the Orchid Growing Society. Because your best friend happens to be president of the Orchid Society and says, I'll give you a link, sure, no problem. I mean, that's fine, that's probably not going to hurt you, but it's not really going to do you much good. So for those of you who are hobbyists or are enthusiasts of some kind of whatever it is that you're blogging about, network with other people that do the stuff that you do. And for those of you who are professionals and maybe developers and you are working for a client, find ways for them to do the networking or do networking on their behalf to really get relevant links from relevant related content type websites. There are lots of people that put a lot of time, effort, money into building link profiles. It is a relatively robust industry. Google says fie on all that. If you have high quality content, that will build high quality links. We don't always believe everything Google says. They've got an agenda that they're pushing, and they really want advertising dollars to roll to Google, and they'd rather you didn't spend your money buying links. So they say, we're going to punish you if you buy links, because we're not going to punish you if you buy the links that say ad at the top of Google. Those are okay links to buy. So it's a difficult, somewhat fraught enterprise to work towards building these links. I do know people that buy links and have not been punished for it. I find the practice very troubling, so I don't do it, but some people do. And then again, this low quality links can hurt your site more than it actually helps. If you are getting links from really questionable sites, one of the things that I do for my clients, often on a monthly basis, I go into Google Search Console and I look at what are the new links that have come in. And sometimes I have no idea where these links are coming from. Really, look at this, and I have a health insurance client out of California, and somebody had created basically a clone of many pages of their site in another language, but it wasn't them. And then it linked a bunch of links linked back to their site. So you can actually, there's a process through Search Console where you can disavow links. You can tell Google, look, these are not our links, we don't want these, make these go away, we don't want them to hurt us, we don't want to count them, just push them away. Sometimes they come from having worked with a previous SEO who said, you need to buy links, you need to get all these links, and then you end up with all these really crappy links. You're better off disavowing them, getting rid of them, wiping those away. All right, so let's talk a little bit about plugins, and I'm not going to spend as much time talking about plugins as I talk about those other things. Rank Math is a relatively new SEO plugin, 10 minutes, that I have checked out. It does a lot of stuff. It's very, very robust. It does most of these things that you need to do for SEO. I think it's much more robust than Yoast. Definitely the free version of Yoast versus the free version of this. I would say check it out. Broken link checker. There is a broken link checker built into some of these other tools. Rank Math has it. All-in-One has it. Yoast does not have it. Certainly that's the free version of Yoast. Broken links are a bad sign to Google. It means you're not staying current with your website, that you're not fixing stuff. And if you're not staying current, you're not fixing stuff, your ranks drop. And then this is the XML sitemap, Google XML sitemap generator. Most of the SEO plugins will have one of these. The thing I don't like about the Yoast SEO plugin, the Yoast sitemap generator, is it generates like sub-sitemaps that sit inside each other. And Google will accommodate a sitemap that has up to 10,000 lines. And sometimes you get these Yoast ones and there's like 10 of them, and each of them have like 2 or 3 URLs in it, and it drives me bonkers. I hate it. All right, I think I only have 2 or 3 slides left. Two more concepts. Schema structured data. Will I be able to leave you a copy of this so that others can download the deck?
Yeah, we'll put in the comments.
Okay, great. I will make sure that happens. So we can spend a little bit more time kind of going through this, and you can absolutely hit me up on Twitter. I will respond. So schema, basically, when HTML was developed, the reason HTML was developed was for displaying content, hypertext. So you had bold, you had underline, you had backgrounds, you had blues, you had reds, you had links. All that stuff had to do with how content was displayed on a web page. And the search engines were relatively smart about figuring out if it's this many characters, it might be a title, or if it's this many numbers, it might be a phone number or an address. But about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, a group of folks got together and created a structured data vocabulary so that you can actually say, this is an address, this is a phone number, this is a logo, this is a brand name, this is an ingredient, this is a cooking time. The net result of that is the difference between a search result that looks like this and a search result that looks like that. I'm going to tell you right now, everybody says structured data does not influence your rankings. You're not going to move from position 3 to position 1. However, if this is in position 3 or this is in position 3, this one gets more clicks. All right? It's not going to improve your rankings, but it will improve your click-through rate at a given ranking. Is that, yeah? Good with that? All right, and then this is just an example of what some schema looks like. I tend to do schema through Google Tag Manager, but there's lots of different ways to do it.
I'm using JSON LD in the header.
Yes.
Is there any point using microdata in the page structure?
No. No, Google absolutely prefers it in JSON. I tend to use it in Tag Manager because I like to separate the code. However, Google's structured data testing tool comes and goes as to whether or not it will read it from Tag Manager, and it consistently reads it in the header. So you're probably better off from the testing perspective. I just know that if I am gonna, like, I don't know, if I relaunch my site or anything, everything is in the Tag Manager. Also, when you're working with third parties, you might want them to have access to the Tag Manager and edit and audit and change your schema without giving them access to your actual pages.
Is the Tag Manager, is that preferable over what Rank Math offers?
I have not tried to do schema through Rank Math, so I don't know the answer.
Okay.
To be honest. All right.
How would you do schema? I didn't understand, like, where do you actually set this up? Is that a plugin or is it?
So there's a schema.org is the site that is devoted to all things schema. I use schema through Google Tag Manager, and I do it in JSON. There are some really great tools that will generate the JSON for you. It's definitely something that requires a little bit of comfort around looking at code. All right, and the last concept that I want to share, and I might run a minute or two, and if Steve throws things at me, I'll duck. content clusters, and when I was talking, this brings us back to this idea about these long tail terms. I'm going to put an example up. Again, this is from my insurance client. That this is the cluster content. This is your head term, and if you can develop content around it, your ability to rank for those terms increases dramatically, and also because you've got inbound links from related content, it increases the value of your core or your pillar content. So the way people have searched, you know, from like 2-word queries to much longer queries has changed a lot. The longer we go, the longer queries become. This is very true of voice queries when people talk into their phones or their smart speakers or whatever. So this is basically just a model of a way to think about creating different types of related content that all interlinks with each other. And this is just a sample, again, from a health insurance client that I have, where the core is healthcare programs. I'm sorry, this wasn't my health insurance. This is an EDU client that has classes on how to be a nurse.
What's the value of internal links? What is the value? I mean, you're talking about external links. I mean, what is the value of? I think
Internal
the value of
links.
that is internal.
Internal links, yeah, absolutely. So what I'm going to do the other side of that. The worst case scenario is you build a landing page that sits separately and nothing links to it. And Google will never, I mean, you can put that in your sitemap, but Google will never find that, and it won't give it much value because Google has decided, well, you have the power to link to this page and you haven't linked to it, can't be worth that much. But if you've got a page about healthcare programs, again, not health insurance, EDU client, they teach people to be nurses. And you've got a page about why choose a career in healthcare that links back to healthcare programs. And you've got another one that types of healthcare degrees that links back. It reinforces this is relevant to all of these different types of content. And also it gives a boost to them because this is now related to healthcare programs. Yeah, helpful?
So are you essentially saying that these internal links are essentially giving these signals to Google so Google will rank you higher because of this? Or
Google will recognize the
in other words, what's the value?
the content, the importance, the interconnection. Context is a word that we use a lot, context. That the context of this is related to this because they're both linking to the healthcare programs.
And does any of this have to do with getting a higher ranking in Google?
Ideally it does,
You have
absolutely.
A certain mass of related data.
In two different ways. One is all of these are likely to do a better job of ranking for those long tail keywords, and because you're showing expertise and authoritativeness, Google is also more likely to give you rankings for your core, your pillar term, which is going to be more of a higher volume head related term. All right. Am I allowed? Please.
With the internal links, does it also contribute to the fact that somebody stays on the site longer, or?
That is a excellent, so whether somebody stays on the site longer, Google's official word is, it doesn't matter, they don't pay attention, it's not going to affect your rankings. That's the official word. They don't look at your Google Analytics. Now, what we've seen is that if you have a search results page and somebody goes from the search results page to your page, and then they go back to the search results page and go to a different page, we call that pogoing. The pogoing does seem to have a negative impact on your rankings, but the actual time they spend on your site doesn't. And one of the tricky things is if somebody only visits one page on your site, if they don't visit a second page, Google has no way of knowing whether they stayed at that page for an hour or for 30 seconds. so it doesn't, they can't track that.
What was POGO again? I'm sorry.
So if you have you go to the search engine results page, and it's got 30 results, and you click on one result, and you go there, and then you go back, and you click on another result, and you go there, and then you go back, and so it's the bouncing back and forth, the
So that's
POGO.
the bounce rate?
Yeah.
It's related to bounce rate, yeah.
It's related.
It's close, but not exactly.
I think we're gonna have to close out on this one.
One last question? No?
I think we take a break.
I'll stick around, and
Yeah.
we'll take a break, and I'll answer questions,
I
okay?
think maybe we'll have you back. Maybe there's other things you want to, maybe you want to go into more detail about some other stuff like schema.org.
Yeah.
Sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. It was very